So, welcome to Wired for Wellbeing, the podcast that is sponsored, brought to you by the Viva event. We are here with another one of our wonderful speakers for the Viva event this year, one of 18, and I'm here with my co-host, co-founder, wonderful friend, Sue Coltman, and she's going to let us know who our new or not new, our guest is for today. Don't know if you're new or you're old, Peter, but we're here together.
Well, hi, good day to everybody. We're here today with Peter McCammon, who we're so grateful is giving us the time and his knowledge and experience as we go into this conversation. Peter's a transformational coach, mainly working with business leaders and business owners. And the key words for me here are, helping with stress, overwhelm, and self-doubt. And that, in your case, Peter, you're working with business leaders, but really most people will be able to relate to those feelings, those situations. And what we'd love to hear from you is how you meet your clients where they are and where the three principles comes into the work that you're doing with them. So I'm going to hand over. Thank you very much and welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. It's an honor to be here and also to be invited to be one of your speakers as well. So thank you. The work that I do as a coach is it's mostly with leaders, owners, founders of small, medium-sized businesses. So that could be where the business has literally 3 or 4 of a team, or it could be up to like a couple of hundred people within the business. I don't really have that many clients in really sort of large multiple organizations, but people mostly when they come to me, they've probably never had a coach before. Coaching is probably more prevalent within larger organizations, or people are more aware of it within larger organizations. Within small, medium-sized, not so much. And so people will very often come to me because they are running a business. They have a family that they're trying to be a father or a husband to their wife, and they probably have zero experience of being coached, never mind experience of the principles or any knowledge of the principles. And so very often when people come to me, they're struggling to cope in some way. It may be that they're highly stressed. It may be that they're struggling, their kind of business is stagnated or flatlined, or growth has stopped and they're not quite sure why, and they're trying to figure that out. Or but they're usually coming because something from their perspective is either broken or not working, or needs fixed in some way. And they very often come, and I guess they bring a story, and so often my clients have never, I'll very often hear the phrase, or a phrase like, I've never told that to anybody before. That's really not unusual, because leadership can be a lonely place, and clients who are running businesses, and if they've got a lot in their head about decisions to do with the business, or it's to do with people in the business, they don't always have somebody within the business to talk to, and they don't always want to bring it home to their families. So it can leave them feeling quite isolated, which leaves people, I think, with a lot in their head, a lot of thinking going on, and a big part of what I guess where I initially meet them is to have them speak a lot of that thinking out into a room. And so often when they begin to hear that out for the first time, there's it's almost like it helps them to, it's almost like a pressure valve has been released, or something like that. And whenever that happens, then yeah, there's a possibility then for us to begin to move forward, and it also gives me a good understanding of where they're at and how they're thinking about life, and how they're thinking about where their problems come from. And I suppose the two things that I bring into my coaching sessions that I guess for me is universal. It's always true. Is this whole idea, and I learned this from Jamie Smart. I did a course called Clarity Coach Training a few years ago, and two of the things that Jamie kept talking about was helping people to understand who they really are and where their experience comes from. And I just latched on. I love the simplicity of that, because people will come into conversations with me with a very fixed and defined picture of who they are, and it tends to be, it will be quite negative a lot of the time, in terms of I can't cope, or I'm not able, or I'm can I do this job, or am I failing, or am their language and their thinking will be so much attached to a negative idea of themselves, and part of my work will be to help them to see the value, worth, and potential that exists within them, not because they're particularly special in and of themselves, but because of where they come from, how we, where we all come from. And then the second part, that whole idea of where their experience comes from. And so what I begin to do is ask them questions to help them to, I suppose, start to reflect on, where their stress comes from, where their idea that they can't do this comes from, where whatever negative ideas that they have about themselves, in terms of their ability to keep it all together, their ability to run a business, their ability to make big decisions, their, whatever it is they're questioning, I begin to, I suppose, have them reflect and question about where the experience of stress or doubt or fear or anxiety or self-worth or lack of self-worth is coming from. Is it coming from something outside of them, and that is somehow flicking switches inside of them and creating that experience that they don't like? Or is it that the things that are happening outside of them are just happening, and they have a story, a narrative, lots of thinking about those things, those events or circumstances that are separate from the event, but that it's actually the thinking, it's actually the story, it's actually the narrative that is what is generating their experience. So that's really very often a starting point, and when I say a starting point, that can be over quite a few conversations before, I've really condensed there what could happen depending on the individual. That could happen over several conversations, or a couple of months of conversations, just depending on where they're at when they first arrive with me.
I'm glad you and I'm glad you brought that up, Peter, because that's exactly what I was thinking when you were sharing that. I'm glad you said that would happen over a period of time, because being a business owner myself many years ago, before coming across this understanding called the 3 principles, we're talking sort of late 90s up until sort of 2008, I was a small business owner along with a business partner, and I was super stressed. I was overwhelmed much of the time, and I could only imagine sitting down with somebody like you, and you sound like you would have been a breath of fresh air to me, because I completely connect with what you say about feeling isolated, because I would not want to take my stress and my overwhelm home with me and lay it all on my kids or my partner at the time. So yeah, it's very isolating. So it's a wonderful service that you're offering. And I was thinking back to how I was, and if you'd have started telling me stress is not coming from outside, I would have been right on your case immediately. I would have gone, what are you talking about? So I'd love if you could share maybe a client story or how you introduce that to business owners we're talking about. But as Sue pointed out, it could be anybody, couldn't it? Not just every human being experiences stress at some point in their life. So yeah, would you be able to?
Well, I suppose just an example of something that I quite often use is that I'll paint a picture or a scenario, and I'll say, imagine you've two people who have been working in a factory for 20 years, and somebody in corporate decides that because wages are cheaper in a different country, they're going to close the factory and move it. And for one of those, for two people, they've both been working for exactly the same amount of time. They joined this company when they were, just out of university or just out of school, whenever it was. And one of those people could have an experience where it's just the kick in the backside that they needed to go and start the business that they've always wanted to start, but were never going to because they feared leaving their job. For another person, that could be just as if their life is over and it's an absolute disaster and they cannot begin to even possibly see a way forwards. And so what I'll always do is try and paint a scenario where two people in exactly the same set of circumstances can have completely different experiences. And then I'll begin to try and unpick with them. Well, what do you think it is that allows two people in exactly the same set of circumstances to have two completely, almost diametrically opposed experiences of the same circumstances? And so I'll use, I suppose, different scenarios like that, and I'll dream up different ideas that they might be able to relate to. I'll try and paint a scenario that could be somehow applicable in their world, or I'll ask them questions like, whenever a certain scenario happens, do you always respond in exactly the same way? And why? And the answer is almost always no. Well, no, I don't always respond. And I say, well, so is that because you have a slightly different experience of that scenario at different times? And then we'll get into trying to understand or ask questions or unpack why that might be. Why might they respond one way on a Tuesday and a different way on a Thursday to exactly the same set of circumstances? So I'm just beginning to, I suppose, slowly open up the possibility that their experience is not being created by their circumstances, by something that is outside of them, and that their experience of what is happening outside of them is being generated by their thinking, their thought in the moment.
It really fascinates me how we've moved from what we're talking about as a huge move from some more traditional ways of being with people and helping people, which might involve quite a lot of going back into previous experiences, into their life story, etc. And if you were trying to fix every aspect of a person's life they were troubled by, you'd be forever going back and trying to fix sources, which is tricky. And I think what you're pointing to, and I love to hear this again and again, is people already have a sense of this. They already know that who they are behind or below the stories. And the piece you said that I thought was also really interesting was when you, just the simplicity, but how profound listening can be. And it felt like that was possibly quite a common starting point for you when you recognize that would be helpful. Is listening something that you see as a really valuable approach with people?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so just for some context, before I became a coach, I worked for 10 years as a psychotherapist. And so I originally trained as a psychotherapist between 2007 and 2009, and came to coaching in 2016, and juggled both of those for a while before I got into, I became a coach full time, just towards the end of 2020. And so the answer to your question is simply yes. Listening is huge. It's I think it can be so important for people who come, and they sit with a stranger or somebody that they've been recommended to come and see, or somebody that they know a little bit, and if they're going to share what they believe to be really important in their world, or some aspect of their story, or some aspect of why they're finding things difficult, and those are things that they really haven't talked about before. I want to be trying to get that with every kind of ounce of my being. I really want to try and get what's going on in their world, and so I spend, I'll very often in those initial sessions, I will just let people talk. I mean, I'll just say, look, what brings you here? And I don't really often need to say much more than that, because they just go. And they will talk. And very often my first session with people is just listening to them, and every now and again I'll break in and reflect back, and I'll say something like, look, you're sharing a lot. I just want to make sure that I'm getting this. What I'm hearing is, and I'll check in with them that I'm getting it right. And there's two reasons for that. Is one is I want to make sure that I'm getting it right. And I want them to know that I'm getting them. So there's two sides to that for me.
Beautiful. As I said, I can't say it enough. I want to say what a breath of fresh air. What a valuable, invaluable probably is the better word, an invaluable service that you're offering to business owners and leaders. And do you work with other people as well as business leaders and business leaders?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I have I've one client right now who runs a charity that supports people who are at risk of suicide. So that's a little bit different to my normal clients. So she's running an organization, but the space that it's in is very different, and the nature of that brings very, very different challenges. In that it's it's an organization that's funded, so funding is a different challenge. But the nature of the work is very different as well, in that their customers, or their clients, if you like, are people who are either at risk of suicide, or they are family members of somebody who is at risk of suicide, or somebody who has suicided. So that brings a very different conversation. And I also I do some work with coaches as well. So because I've built a coaching practice, that I suppose has put me in the line of sight of some people who are trying to build a coaching practice. And so I don't have too many coaches. I try not to. I love working with people who are running organizations. That's kind of my passion, and so I'll typically have 2 or 3 coaches that are working with me at any one point in time.
One of the I was wondering whether you have anyone say to you, why has no one pointed this out before? Because we have talked about the simplicity, we've talked about how profound this is, and yet we're not talking, we're not actually talking therapy at all, are we? We're talking about, it seems to me, what we talk about is uncovering for the person, helping them to uncover their innate resilience, their innate capacity to have wisdom flow and have creativity flow. And do you feel, given your past career as well, that this is a very, very holistic approach to people's ideas of burnout and their experience of being of exhaustion, etc.?
It's a very different approach. I mean, maybe a little bit like what you said, Sheila. I had a burnout experience in 2006, and if I've often said, if I'd known then what I know now, I wouldn't have burnt out. And um, I usually follow that by saying, but I needed to do that because I wouldn't have heard it at the time, and I needed to do the journey that I've had to do since then to learn what I've learned, so that I can kind of go back into spaces like that to work with people who are where I was to actually be able to speak into that, and so it's not a it's not a therapeutic journey in that I I'm much more interested in a conversation with somebody about where they're at and where they want to get to, which is different from the therapeutic conversation, and in the sense that it's, for me, I suppose most of my clients, whenever I was a therapist, it was just, I just want life back to normal. I just, I'm broken, fix me. That was the kind of the underlying, I suppose, feeling, or energy. Whereas with this, people come and, sometimes they have a really clear idea of what it is they want the future to look like. So sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just struggling with where they're at, and their head is just so buried in the mire of whatever is going on right now. They haven't been able to lift their heads up and think towards the future. And sometimes that can be so powerful. Just, when I ask somebody, what is it that you want? I very often get the answer to what they don't want. The question of what is it that they don't want. But when I press in, what they want, they so often people don't know, and I think we live in a world where, that question can be so important, where what is it you actually want in life? What is it that you desire? And so often, I think people don't know. They've never asked the question. They somehow think, well, that's selfish. That's not the way life works. There's some sort of resistance to that question of what is it that they want, and so people, whenever I open up with them in terms of that sense of what is it that they want to create in their world, what is it they want life to look like, and that's a piece of the jigsaw that once that gets put we'll write that up on a flip chart, and we'll keep that for the clients that come back, and that will remain so that we know where we're trying to get to. But my conversations with them about getting there have a foundation in do you know who you really are? When they get a sense of that, that can be really powerful. Whenever somebody begins to see that they're not broken, they don't need fixed, they're not in need of repair, they're not defective, there is nothing wrong with you, that can be deeply impactful. And then the other thing is that whenever they see that they're where their experience is coming from, that can be deeply impactful as well. And I think, in answer to your question, Sue, do they ask the question, why have I never heard this before? I don't really get that question very often, but because it seems to me as if there's a degree of, I want to use the word relief, that there's a different way of seeing things, there's a different way of experiencing things, that they kind of, rather than getting into a why didn't somebody tell me this, they quickly pick up and they start to run with it, and they move forward with it, and they less looking back over their shoulders with regret, and more, that I've got something here that I can run with now, and that, I'll very often use the phrase, whenever you see what I'm pointing to here, it allows you to take your power back from your circumstances. And I think that's really powerful for people, because rather than being as living life as a victim of their circumstances, as a victim of, a government decision to do whatever that affects their business, to change taxes or raise, something, some kind of expense that they hadn't encountered or hadn't expected to encounter, national insurance or something like that, which was a recent development, or some sort of problem with an employee. So rather than them see themselves purely as a victim of all of these, the things that are outside of them that they can't control, they have much more agency in how they experience life because of the direction that the principles can point them in.
Am I right in thinking, from what you're saying, that obviously there's many approaches to these conversations, but it sounds like you bring this understanding out of people to them to share with them, but are you not necessarily explicitly talking about the principles? Is it more a conversation where the understanding is drawn out, so that people see for themselves, and it just makes what you've just said, like there's a relief, and when there's relief, you somehow know you're on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's pretty. I'll not say rare, but it's probably rare that I would have a conversation with somebody and actually reference the 3 principles of mind, consciousness, and thought. I'll draw that out. I'll talk around that, but I don't tend to use it as a here's the magic thing, the 3 principles. Sometimes I'll reference something, like, a book that I've quite often referenced is Michael Neill's Inside Out Revolution. And that's been a book that some people that just really resonated for some of my clients over the last few years. And that book, obviously, it does speak to the principles in a more direct way, but in terms of the sessions that I have with people, certainly, not so much. It's much more drawing out. I'm really interested in 2 things, is helping them to have a different perspective of themselves and helping them to understand where their experience comes from, so that they can have a different experience of whatever is going on in their world right now. And so for me, there's a practicality in that. And so I try and, I suppose, keep it practical and keep it simple, in the sense that, I don't think people are coming to me necessarily to understand the principles. That they want a different experience of life to allow them to go and build a business, or be a better dad and husband while they're running their business, or whatever it is. That's what they're focused on. They're not looking for a tool as such. So I suppose, as I see it, the necessity of them going deep with the principles, it's not. I don't need to do that with them. As long as I have an understanding of how it can help them and can bring that into their world, I think, my job as a coach is to help my clients get what they want, not to explain the principles.
Yeah, I hear you as a coach, 100%. I mean, we're in the business of helping people get what they want, whatever that happens to be, 100%. Really appreciated listening to your sharing. And I heard so much in there. A phrase that came to mind was like, how cheap is your well-being? We're talking about, when people really see where well-being is, what well-being is, and where we are the source of that. They don't no longer need to be focusing on the outside world. It's like it's an inside out job, right? We're talking about wired for well-being here, so that's why I bring it up, I guess. And I know that we're come to the end of our sort of 30-minute mark. Really want to say thank you again for being with us, Peter. And we're really looking forward to having you with us at the Viva event as a speaker this year. One of the 18, as we say. If people want to get in touch with you and they want to find out more about you, where can they find you? What's the easiest way?
Oh, best place to connect with me probably these days is LinkedIn or Facebook. And just Peter McCammon. If you put in my name, it's an unusual surname, so there's not very many Peter McCammons on LinkedIn or Facebook. So that's the easiest place to find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again, and we'll see everybody next time on the next episode. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.
Cheerio.